In a competitive world, average won't cut it. The Success Launch Point shows you how to stand out, deliver massive value, and rise above the crowd. With on-demand courses, expert coaching, and a community focused on growth, you'll accelerate your career and your paycheck. It's time to level up. Check out modernobserver.com/launchpoint.
Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And we have the election results off-peak election. But one of my probably more minor takeaways, but if it was interesting before we get to bigger things, is that both sides of the network aisle are full of, you know what, if you listen to conservative media, they were talking about, New Jersey's going to flip. Wasn't even close. And obviously the biggest story is New York. So I'll just tee it off to you.
Yeah. New York didn't surprise anybody. Every poll said Mamdani was going to win. What really bothers me about the New York election is the Democratic machine. Now, I don't know if you got a chance to actually see the New York City ballot. But
yeah, I did see the ballot. Yeah.
Trying to find Andrew Cuomo on that ballot, you needed a map and a compass.
It was like Tammany Hall back in the 1800s. Yes. Yep, I would agree with that. I think not obviously done by mistake. You look at the Democratic machine. I do think we talked about this last week, like Jeffries and others. Obama skirted the idea of supporting him, but now they own it. So your thoughts? I mean, let's just be clear. He's not a socialist. He's a communist. He's I would say radical Islamic bordering on extremism, certainly a anti-Semite, and him and AOC and Bernie, the self-hating Jew, is essentially the leaders of the new Democratic Party. I think the mask is off. The whole illusion of moderates is.
Well, I don't think it's a mask of moderates. I just think the moderates have been beaten to death by the socialists. They could have stood up for themselves. They chose not to. But I think this is going to backfire in a major way. Because first of all, Kathy Hochul has already said, well, most of what he claims he's going to do, he can't do. That's my job, and I'm certainly not going to do these things. She said there's not going to be free buses. There's not going to be free grocery stores. So most of his platform has already fallen apart because it's not within the purview of the mayor. But I think more importantly, it's going to have major repercussions for the Democrats in the midterms, and not in the way they think. Because let's face it, one, New York's governor, Kathy Hochul, is up for re-election next year, and she's already behind in the polls to Elise Stefanik. So there's a good chance that New York State could flip the governor's seat.
Let me interject one thought about that. I think the Mamdani election might help Hochul, who's an absolute moron, by the way, because if she stands up to him, it can mitigate some of the attacks on her from the other side, from the Republicans.
I don't think she's going to stand up to him, though.
Okay.
I think she'll go about her business and just, but more importantly, between that and the landslide of Proposition 50 in California, what the Democrats don't seem to realize, and it's a pretty big thing to ignore, but basically, there's a country between the Colorado River and the Appalachian Mountains that basically goes out of its way to do the opposite of what New York City and California do. Middle America does not like what's going on in California, what's going on in New York City. And we've already seen over the past 2 weeks, property values in Connecticut have gone up because people are leaving the city. We've seen it in New Jersey. I don't know how the election in New Jersey is going to play out with that, because now they're probably not going to necessarily want to move to New Jersey. But you are going to see what we saw in the 70s if he tries to raise taxes and put restrictions on landlords. We saw it in the 70s where landlords literally, because they could not rent the apartments at a profitable rate, burnt down their buildings. It's where the saying "the Bronx is burning" came in.
Yes. I think a couple of things. One thing I think is alarming. There's two things that are alarming. I think Jews are in the most precarious position.
Yes, they are.
In America, at least since the 30s when they had a huge uptick. And I think it's actually more dangerous than the 30s. Not in Germany, obviously. I'm talking in America. I think that you had a good point the other day that it's spreading to the right. In fact, Dershowitz was cautioning and talking about that the Republicans have to disavow Tucker Carlson, who I used to really like all the time, right? Even when he had his podcast. He interviewed a white nationalist Holocaust denier. And I've also seen, heard, whatever, watched Tucker make some not so slick anti-Semitic inferences, like the killing of Jesus and how before they did that, they were eating hummus. So it's on both sides, but it's very dangerous because it's more accepted now. This guy, Mondami, 20 years ago, there's no way he would have won, especially in New York. But I also, the old adage, I blame the Jews. Many Jewish New Yorkers voted for the guy. And the other troubling thing, so the anti-Semitism is troubling, I heard a very good editorial about the roots of revolution, especially communist revolutions. And it's not the down and outers. It's not even the ultra rich. It's your college educated, upper middle class that feels that because they have a higher education, that they come from a certain background, they're entitled to a certain lot in life. Not to be multimillionaires, but whatever you want to call it, 3 acres and a mule. And they're the ones who sow the seeds to revolution. And it's things that we've talked about. You look at the employment situation with college grads. It's not getting any better, okay? In fact, I heard a very interesting
I gotta hold you off right there, because ADP's job numbers came out this morning stronger than expected.
Okay, but that's a blip. Overall trend is white collar employment, especially college graduates, is very difficult. In fact, you have college graduates. It was some Apex Technical School, I think, of this segment I heard, that they're getting college graduates applying after they graduate. So what is the point? The point is that the job market for college graduates is going to be difficult for a while, especially with technology, AI. And you look at who voted for Mondami, overwhelmingly young college graduates. That is a problem because you look at the ramifications of a jerk like him actually assuming real power. You could call the mayor, of New York real power, but there's obviously things that he can be muted on. But yeah, it's a whole thing of communism is more and more increasingly embraced, especially with young college-educated Democrats. I think that could be scary. On top of the fact that anti-Semitism is really not nothing really to be all that shunned.
Yeah, the anti-Semitism bothers me more than the communism right now, because you're actually seeing more Gen Zers starting businesses. So, in fact, Gen Z is the most entrepreneurial generation we've had in decades. So they're not going to give in to communism. Yes, these are college educated people, which just goes to prove the point we've been talking about for years, how useless a college education has become.
100%. If you can't think clearly enough that you're going to vote for a moron that never had a job, yeah, your college degree is essentially, I wouldn't hire you. I think you're an idiot.
I think the fact that this is happening in New York is actually the best possible place for it to happen. A lot of the things that Mondami wants to do have already been done in Kansas City, and they failed miserably. Some of them were actually tried in Vermont, and they failed miserably. The difference here, nobody pays attention to what happens in Vermont. Nobody pays attention to what happens in Kansas City. New York can't get out of the spotlight. So when these same policies fail spectacularly, and they will because they always do, there's no place for the Democrats to hide.
I think your point is more than well-founded. The only caveat I would say to that is that Mondalvi's so ineffective, he's never had a job. He just might bullshit the whole time and just let things, not really implement it, which would be dangerous for our country because, he's got a good line of bullshit and he's young, he's appealing. So that's the only thing. If he actually does something, I 100% agree with you. Best thing that ever happened to conservatism, capitalism, and Republicans. Yes, 100%.
Yeah,
but the only thing that scares me is he's so ineffective, and maybe people like Bernie and others would tell him, hey, don't do it. Just keep the bully pulpit and don't do shit. Just keep spreading the shit, if you catch my drift.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but there's certain things that he can do that I think he will do. And the biggest of them is he has said over and over again that he is essentially going to gut the NYPD. Well, guess what? That is going to be a disaster. And quite frankly, even if he doesn't, there have been an amazing number of police officers who have already said if he wins, no matter what he does, they're retiring, they're leaving the force. Well, if you don't have a functioning police department in New York City, crime has been out of control there for years. Eric Adams actually did an admirable job reining it in, but under Mondami, tourism is going to fall off. You're going to see businesses have to close because of increased crime. Obviously, the safety of the citizens itself is in danger. But also, we've already know from Trump's comments that the federal government is not going to bail New York out. Again, it's going back to the 70s when
Gerald Ford.
Right, the famous headline, Ford to New York, drop dead. It's going to happen again. And you know what? The rest of the country didn't care when Ford did it, and I don't think they're going to care if Trump does it.
Well, I think it would not just be neutral like Ford. I think it'd be a positive thing because you're dealing with such an obnoxious asshole. And then looking at the election overall, I believe I'm going to go out on a limb. It's a tempest in a teapot. New Jersey, and again, you look at the media, and I think both media sides, left and right, are full of shit because you listen to more right-wing media. Oh yeah, we're going to flip New Jersey and blah. Okay, basically, it doesn't really bother me. Both very blue states, both Republican candidates were completely shitty, and I think it's a tempest in a teapot. I think it has very little bearing on 2026.
I don't
Could
think,
have been better. Yes. Am I freaked out? No.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to have much an effect on 2026. I do think it's going to one election in particular is going to have a big effect on 2028. And that is the gubernatorial race in Virginia. Because I honestly think the Virginia laws limit term limit the governor to one term. I think Abigail Spanberger just positioned herself to beat the hell out of Gavin Newsom in a presidential primary in 2028.
Well done, Dr. Lopkin. I did not think of that. Yes. I actually think you have a great point, by the way. Yes. Because she's a lot more palatable to what you would say, the flyby area of the United States.
Yes.
I think Gavin Newsom is just a house of cards waiting to happen. I think people would throw up looking at him 24/7. He's got the Hillary effect. The more you see them, the less you like them, which is the antithesis of normal human behavior.
Yeah, I like that analogy. I was going in a slightly different direction. I think he's got the Kamala effect, where the more he talks and the more people actually challenge him, everything he says is going to fall apart, the same way Kamala did in the 2020 primary. I mean, remember, they're essentially running on exactly the same platform. They were cohorts in destroying the state of California. I think once he is being primaried, and I think Spanberger is an excellent candidate to do it. I still think there's going to be a few more that we don't know yet from the rank and file Democrats who'll decide to run for governor. Again, remember at this point in their campaigns, nobody had heard of Bill Clinton or Barack Obama yet.
Mm-hmm. So I absolutely 100% agree with that. I think when we didn't have this on the agenda, but I still think certain things boggle my mind, and certain things I still find amazingly hysterical. And one of them, among many, is Kamala Harris. My God, I know it's overused, but did we dodge a bullet? The dumbest, and I've been around the block, devoid of any original thought.
I
don't know. 16-year-olds go ahead.
I don't know if you saw the recent interview she did with Jon Stewart.
Yeah, I did. I saw clips from it. Go ahead.
Yeah, Jon Stewart is asking her questions, and it was almost a mirror. We talked a lot about the look on Oprah's face when she suddenly realized how stupid Kamala Harris is. Jon Stewart had that same look on his face, and he suddenly went, oh my God, it's not made up. She really is this dumb.
She is, again, we'll move on, but yes, so dumb. And I think because I do have a twisted sense of humor, I love it because she's smart enough to know at least she needs to fake being smart. So when she gets that look of intellectualism, which is like a squirrel kind of trying to compute how to get the nut, I just love it and tries to be really profound. It's actually must-see TV. Speaking of which, the disingenuousness of the Democratic Party and how they're kind of grasping at straws, I think this election gave them a little hope. But Pritzker was on, I think it was MSNBC with Wallace, I forgot her first name, another genius, talking about we never referred to Republicans or Trump as Hitler or fat. And then there's like about an hour of him, clip after clip.
Then it's let's go to the videotape.
There you go. And so dumb that they don't realize this is not 1960, that you got to get the film from somewhere. But and then you have Pelosi, who either is increasingly becoming more senile or just hitting the bottle like Kamala. I do believe Harris does hit the bottle. But talking about CNN, that Trump is the worst person in the world. There's people doing genocides in Africa, but Trump is the worst person in the world.
Because they don't learn about the hyperbole. Every time something violent happens, they go, "Oh, no, we can't have political violence." But then they go out and incentivize it. And, you mentioned CNN. I think this is another problem the Democrats are going to have.
Yeah.
CNN has a streaming service, and the live feed covering the election, 3 correspondents, one of which was Ben Shapiro. So even the diehard, basically they're going to have to just huddle behind MS now, because every other outlet out there is shifting to the center.
True. Even CBS News, forgot her name, that's coming in cleaning house. They're shitting in their proverbial pants. Was a Gayle King can't happen soon enough. Sometimes in life you just wake up and you're friends with Oprah, dumber than rocks. Well, we won't even have to elaborate on that. But yeah, interesting. And something, you're right, because there's really nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to CYA for idiot comments like Pritzker or Pelosi. And even with CNN, they were looking at her like, what are you talking about? Worst person in the world. In closing, we have Dick Cheney passed away. I'll be mean for a second. You'll probably chastise me about this, but good riddance. War criminal.
Yeah, to put it mildly, there's no shortage of controversy where Dick Cheney is concerned. His death is not really a surprise. He passed away from a combination of the fallout from pneumonia as well as cardiac and vascular disease. But again, this is not a surprise. Dick Cheney had his first heart attack, I believe, at age 37. So, yes. and he was in his 80s when he passed. So, I
think 84.
Yeah, you do have to give him credit where credit is due. He was a major force of history. Not saying if it's a good force, but he was a force of history.
Yeah, I think what he did kind of crosses the pale. If you go into war, you have all those young people on both sides, other people as well, non-combatants, combatants. You better make sure that you got your shit together and it's not just some created nonsense. And so, yeah, and also beyond that, we can debate that all day, and there's really no debate. The other thing, he's such a part. You can look at how the Republican Party has changed. They mentioned him a little bit on Fox. 20 years ago, they'd have gavel-to-gavel coverage of his funeral. It's the change, the transformation of the Republican Party via Trump is profound.
You've seen both parties massively transformed in just the last 8 years. Mm-hmm. The Republican Party is now the party of the working class, which it never was prior to Trump. And in fact, the Democratic Party had hired a Democratic think tank to do an analysis. The study came out last week. And 6-1 working class Americans said, no, the Democratic Party does not represent them. They identify more with the Republican Party. They've lost union workers. They've lost, because of their shift to the left. And Trump was actually smart enough this time around during the 2024 election to capitalize on that and reach out to these audiences.
Yes, you're 100% correct with that. It's a total transfer. It used to be the country club Republicans. Now it's coastal elite Democrats and the legacy people that, yes, my friend Sean voted for, my father voted for Democrats, and I think you're the party of the people. Yeah. Anyway, smoke another joint. I 100% agree with you. It's a monumental shift. The only thing that comes close, believe it or not, was Nixon with the silent majority of the 70s, switching, not to the degree of we have with MAGA, but he did fundamentally change things by getting more of the blue collar vote, especially in 68 and 72.
Yes, but there is a big difference between the two transformations, and it may not bode well for the Republicans because there is still a split between the traditional GOP and the MAGA GOP. And we see it in all of these local elections because there is a big difference between a Republican voter and a Trump voter. When Trump goes out on the campaign trail, and you did not see that this year, he did not campaign, he was busy doing better things. But the Trump effect does not necessarily translate down ticket if he's not on the campaign trail.
Agreed. And sometimes, his participation doesn't help, to your point there.
Depending on where, GOP, yes.
Yeah, exactly. It depends where. Well, any final thoughts on this verdict, the election? Before you give your analysis, I think it's, let's say, New York is huge. I think the others are tempest in a teapot. So you had shitty candidates in blue states. I like your analysis about the Virginia gubernatorial race. I think that's a very, very right-on situation, and I think she might be poised to do bigger and better things. But what is your analysis or takeaway of what just happened last night?
Yeah, I think Spamberger did position herself well for a 2028 run, especially since in just the past week and a half, both Kamala Harris and Newsom have said in interviews, or at least hinted at the fact that they do intend to run for president. Well, that's going to be problematic for both of them because they share the same donors, they share the same base. If Spamberger comes in from the other side of the continent, different donor base, different voter base, Virginia
and intelligent and sane.
Yes,
intelligent and sane.
Also, Virginia resonates a lot more with Middle America than California does. I think Newsom and Harris could cancel each other out.
I think that's right on. But for my own selfish motivations, Newsom I can do without. But please, at least have Kamala get into at least halfway through the primaries, because that is must-see TV.
Well, I want to see both Harris and Newsom in the Democratic debates, because I want to see fellow Democrats just ripping them apart for what they did to California.
I'd love to see that. Well, another great show, Dr. Lopkin. Our listeners can contribute to the process, can't they?
Yes, they can. Go to xvadio.com/connect. Let us know what you're thinking. What are your opinions? You can also message us at the Carnivore Radio Facebook page. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Radio at xvadio.com, the Carnivore Radio website, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
See you next week, Dr. Lopkin.
We'll see you then.